Now, for the few minutes we have, I invite you to build up on what was just said. I don't think I need to, to explain or to rehearse this idea, this fantastic idea of the Church as a masterpiece of mediation. We are all mediators, so we all know what really caught our attention. The question of secularism, the question of pluralism, or secularization, pluralization, the challenges of clericalism, of feminism, this all a very important idea of the option. We live in a world of options, the global dimension, and very important, I think, also what we might understand under the idea of a genuine pluralism. So I invite you to raise your hands. We have 4 microphones. I hope they are here. Identify yourself in a word and be very short. So microphones, please.
Yes. My name is Alessandro Ferrara. I teach political philosophy at the University of Rome, Tor Vergata here. 2 wonderful presentations. Thank you to both José Casanova and Hans Joas. I have one and the same question to be shared by the 2 of them. And that is the following. I'll phrase it in the vocabulary of the first and then of the second. José suggested in a great suggestive way 4 challenges for the Church in the 21st century: secularization, pluralism, clericalism, gender. My question is, isn't there a 5th challenge, namely democracy? Let me articulate this. I'll then go to rephrase the question for Hans Joas. When the Church was born, democracy was a memory from the past, from Athens, and even the Roman Republic was gone. And it would be 1,000 years before you would have the first experiments with the Italian city-states. For the first 1,000 formative years, the Church had no democracy around. Now, after 20th century of its history, we live in a world where democracy has become a horizon, where everything is a choice, including faith, but democracy somehow is perceived worldwide by more than half of humanity as the one legitimate form of government. This is new. It happened since the last 100 years, and not for the preceding 19 centuries. Why isn't this a challenge? A 5th challenge for the Church, and in the language of Hans Joas, you listed a number of desired features: a church as being missionary, not triumphalist, having a concrete universalism. These are all your words. And somehow you suggested agape as an antidote to a hierarchical structure, which obviously is, in a way, the sedimentation of centuries where democracy was not around except in books. Now, wouldn't one want to add that extra adjective to those lists? Yes, or why not? And just to finish with one line, isn't this a challenge in the sense that the Church is the Church siding and perceived by humanity as siding, the Catholic Church as siding with democracy, or as being indifferent to democracy? So indifferent whether the world goes in a democratic sense or goes in the opposite sense. What? No.
We gather a few more observations, comments, substantial comments. Yes, please. Over there.
Eric Borgman from the Netherlands. What struck me in both of your lectures, but especially in the one of Hans Joas, was the importance of history in a certain way. And I would argue that one of the main challenges for the Church would be how to deal in a positive way with history as something that is occurring to the Church, as not something it makes, but it is happening to her. Well, and that is, I think here it is a very profound, even theological problematic, because then The issue is not so much how much can the church bring to the situation, but how much can she learn from the situation in a, I would argue, ultimately theological manner. Why is it theologically necessary for the church to learn something which is not coming from the church? And I think this is exactly what is at stake in the whole debates on continuity and discontinuity. The whole problem here is, once you simply say that the church can only learn something it already knew in a certain way, you're always stuck, because then history is always something you have to get to. But the point is, and I would argue this is the main thing of the Second Vatican Council, the signs of the times are things that are said to us from history in a very profound way. God is talking to us not only through the church.
Thank you, Professor Barman. Yes, please.
Pavel Hosek, Czech Republic. I have a short question which is in tension with what was just said, friendly tension. I'm just wondering, after hearing these two great lectures, how do you as sociologists relate the normativity, which is a necessary dimension of theology or of doctrine, of dogma, of revelation really, with the descriptivity of whatever can be found by sociological research? In other words, it's kind of related to what was just said, but it's sort of from approaching it from the other end. Isn't there a sort of tension between the normativity of humble, obedient, listening interpretation of God-given revelation and whatever can be discovered by empirical methodologies of social sciences as being the contemporary situation of culture and society? In other words, how do we handle that hermeneutically? I mean, not just referring to ecclesial documents or quoting some theologians, but I mean, theology wants to interpret revelation, which is in a sense given, I think, or continuing, and we are talking about general revelation in history and so on, but that is an option to be made. Is that the option that is being made? That's my question. Or, I mean, I'm sort of advocating the more conservative attitude that would be a sort of reluctant to be too quick in adjusting to whatever can be found by sociological research. Is that clear?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Dr. Pavel. Fourth intervention before I pass the word to the two speakers. If there is, yes, please. C'è possibile anche di fare le domande in italiano, se c'è bisogno.
Thank you very much. My question is going in the same line. If everything, it's nice to say everything is an option, but our question is, what is not an option? What is for a Christian not an option? If you are living in a free world, it's simple to live in options. But when you are confronted with persecution and with other difficulties, you have to understand what we are standing for. I understand that this is not a question for a sociologist.
Okay, all right, thank you. So after those four interventions, I guess I pass the word, Jose, would you like to answer, to comment, or to?
I think those are questions for all of us. I don't think that we have the answer to these questions. Obviously, the issue of internal pluralization, the issue of gender, the issue of clericalism, which I brought, are ways in which the church needs to incorporate, to change its hierarchic authoritarian structure. But I do not believe that the church as an institution adapting the method of democracy is a solution I mean, it's not, so if we are going to see democracy in the way in which it is institutionalized, as party systems, as division of powers. Now, if we think of democracy as, let's say, direct democracy, discursive democracy, participatory democracy, as you know, within democratic debates, there are many, many questions. So if the answer is we should democratize the internal structure of the church, I don't think this leads to solutions at a time when most of the political democracies are in very serious crisis institutionally. So yes, democratize, but in the sense of precisely less clerical, less male-directed, more pluralistic church, less centralized church in this respect, yes. So yes, it has to incorporate the democratic spirit of the age, but not necessarily the democratic institutions per se. I mean, to a certain, you could say that the election of the electoral system of the papacy is one of the first forms of electoral systems from which then political institutions learn. So there is ways of institutional changes that can be adapted. But I think that this is not the key issue of democratizing institutions of the church. I think this, for me, is not the key issue. How to bring clearly pluralism in the church and the possibility of everybody participating, especially women. I mean, this is the real issue, I think, that we have of democracy in the church mainly, is, and the laity. It has to be a less clerical church, the people of God. So, as to the historicity, yes, I mean, this is precisely what I argue about the council, putting it at the very core of the hermeneutics of the self-understanding of the church, the people of God in movement. And they simply understood this historicity as the need to discern the signs of the times. So I think that the model is there, whether then we prefer to think of the church as an institution that has the eternal truth then forever and doesn't then need to discern the signs of the times. So yes, historicity I think is crucial. Tension between normativity and facticity. Again, I'm not going to say, as the sociologist, I stand for facticity. There's a lot of problematic about the self-understanding of the social sciences as sciences. Look, we've been social scientists for a long time. I cannot say that we have developed any scientific theory that has hold in the same way as scientific theories in the natural sciences. It's a way of self-understanding. The social sciences is a way of self-understanding. I'm not interested purely in facticity. The sociology, which only gives you the facts, is a gathering of information. The actual then elaboration of the interpretation of these facts is going to lead to also competing interpretations within the social scientific community. So I don't think the question is really normativity on the one side, facticity on the other, but to understand a form of hermeneutic of interpretations that takes the facts very seriously, but then offers different ways of interpreting these facts that can be interpreted differently depending upon which perspective one takes. I will leave the other question of options for Hans.
With regard to the question Alessandro Ferrara has posed, I would recommend to make a distinction between, let's say, a Catholic Church that has a positive attitude to the spirit of democracy and a democratized church. These are two different things. For me, the great problem has been that for a very long time, you could say partly until after the Second World War, it was not so clear that the Catholic Church is in favor of democratic political regimes. And it is an interesting question in which sense this even, let's say, permeates more philosophical questions. This morning we had a debate about the understanding of truth in the Catholic tradition, and I'm suspicious, so to speak, that the specific understanding of truth is a kind of authoritarian understanding and a non-democratic understanding of the process of finding out what the truth is. Yeah? But that is very different from imagining that the church itself has to have democratic structures, whatever that exactly would mean. And I would say many institutions of democratic societies have not democratic structures in this sense, of course. Courts don't have, universities do not have or should not have democratic structures, if you know what I'm thinking about. Yeah? Second, I very much think that, as I said in a very brief statement during the talk, that there is an interaction in history between moral developments that are not initiated, for example, by the church, learning processes in which the church may play a creative role or in which the church clearly is on the learning side. I've written a book on the history of human rights. I would say in the history of human rights, the Catholic Church is clearly more on the learning side. And then at a certain point, when the church had developed a positive attitude to the idea of human rights, it started a retrospective self-characterization of always already having anticipated this future development. But one doesn't have to trust that. Now, the problem with the signs of the times is that we do not know exactly what the signs of the times are. I like to quote the German Emperor William II, who, when the automobile came up, said, "This is a transitory phenomenon. I believe in the horse." Yeah. And I have the impression that many people in the church now think, oh, this emancipation of women is a transitory phenomenon. I believe in patriarchalism or something like that. And who knows whether they are right in the empirical sense, so to speak. Yeah, I think they're wrong. But we don't know, and it is a tricky business to identify the signs of the times. I agree with what José said on the third question, and will not anything to that, but I need a minute to say I feel very seriously misunderstood by what you said. First, I did not say everything is an option. This whole reference to William James, had the message to say, you can live with a great variety of other cultures around you and not feel attracted to any of them. I wrote in this Faith as an Option book, you may be aware that there is 1 billion other women than your wife around, but that does not mean that you are constantly attracted by 1 billion of other. So that's why I distinguish a genuine option from just the existence of other possibilities for action that are not relevant for the way you lead your life. And secondly and lastly, I do not even speak of choice in matters of religion, because I think the notion of choice does not do justice, let's say, to the phenomenology of the process in which our religious or secular convictions are formed. So my favorite term is being ergriffen sein in German, being captivated by something, because that has this passive dimension, whereas choice sounds as if you are completely free to choose whatever you want. So that was a misunderstanding, and it's important for me to clarify that.
I'd like to give the word to Archbishop Menamparampil to make his comment, please.
I will be very brief. I must thank the speakers for stimulating thought and also evoking very interesting questions that should make us think. I always consider that social sciences is a help not only in organizing social society, but also in deepening my faith. I understand very many things of faith also stimulated by social thought, though occasionally they may be very provocative, may challenge me, but it helps me to reflect. I believe there is need of mutual criticism and mutual evaluation and help. We maybe in some occasions criticize the other science also evaluates us. The other time, what was said very strongly was pluralism and diversity. Coming from India, I agree perfectly with this reality. Because situations are different, our historic experiences are different, evolution of thought has been different. A relationship between the church, the religious authority and secular authority have been different. Those who lived under strong religious authority have complexes. They don't realize that other societies that did not live under strong religious authority locally, they don't have those complexes. So sometimes you are suffering from those complexes like post-colonial. I tell my own countrymen, sometimes we are suffering from post-colonial complex. You must get rid of it. Then only you become really free. In the same way, we have a complex about the church exercise authority certain periods of history. So we have developed a complex which also has a negative influence on our philosophical thinking and theological reflection as well. We need also to pay attention to this. Our understanding of the secular itself is different, and as it may be philosophical atheism, hedonism, as you said. In Indian context, when you secular in public life, it just means non-sectarian, just neutral and non-partisan. And we welcome this secular vocabulary. And we would like our government to be secular in our context. Understanding of religion itself is different. We give the emphasis to administrative dimension, conceptual dimension, but religion has depth. India would give importance. Religion has deeper, your deeper self. That is religion. Are you referring to, you want to empty yourself of that depth? You want to get rid of that depth when you say you want to be secular. So this dimension we could give a lot of attention. Religion can be devotion. For many people it's devotion. Others intellectually satisfying answers, theology. For others, none of these, but just commitment to humanity, commitment to God. And to another group, it is merely mysticism, absolute mysticism. So religion has a variety of dimension of each one emphasized in different ways, some in exclusive way as to create trouble within the church or among the larger society. And on the contrary, when one is not exclusive of the other, they are integrative. And people have different orientations. Some are devotion-oriented, others intellectually oriented, others are socially oriented, and others mystically oriented. And just give 2 or 3 examples. Then you say that is a completed picture. I am denying, which really am I denying? I am denying the religion of devotion. I am denying the religion of intellectual, but other dimensions as well, which also need to be given attention. And I would just add one more. A multidisciplinary approach to issues. The women's issue, for example, justice issue. Amartya Sen has written a big book, The Idea of Justice, famous Campbell. He says how wanting to create the perfectly just society of created injustice, because you have a very reductive concept of justice. So when you look at this issue, feminism or environmentalism, use of authority, from multidisciplinary point of view, then you have a little bit of holistic. That's what we often miss, I'm afraid. So from my own particular discipline, if I am specialized in one discipline, I speak like an infallible person. OP is not infallible, but in my own field, I claim to be infallible. This is also equally ridiculous. But on the contrary, when I begin to respect other disciplines, and with their limitation, we complete each other, I think greater wisdom will come, both in the secular field and also in the religious field. And maybe I'll end with what Cardinal said. This challenge to religion in secularization is a positive force, because there was need of some criticism. And it came maybe negatively. Historical reasons, it came negatively. But if you accept it positively, it will make us understand even religion in a deeper way. Depth is important for religion. Thank you.